Welcome back to another tutorial. This is Stephanie, and today we'll be making a cookie snow globe together. Okay, so what we'll need today is a sharp pair of scissors, your cookie, doesn't have to be the exact same shape as mine, but your typical snow globe shape, a scribe tool. If you don't have a scribe, a toothpick works as well, and an edible marker, which is optional, and I'll show you at the end why. And here are the colors that we'll be using. You can pick whatever colors you want. These are the ones that I've chosen, and I have some white nonpareils here as well. So first thing I want to do is grab my white outline icing, and I'm going to outline the bottom of the snow globe, as well as about a third or a quarter way up of the side of the snow globe. I don't want to go all the way around. Reason being is the bottom part of my snow globe will be like a snowy kind of hill, and the top part will be the sky. So that's why I'm only going a little bit ways up, and then I'll grab my dark blue icing, my outline consistency, and I'll continue my line. This way when we flood it, you won't see a different color outline with your flood. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and flood it, and I'm just going to draw a rough little line here with my flood icing. This is just sort of a guideline so I know up to what point to flood. And then with the same icing, I'm just going to go around the edge and not put too much pressure. When I'm close to my edge and I'm close to my outline, I don't want to put too much pressure and overflow the cookie. So you can see that I'm going a lot slower than when I do flood the inside of the cookie, just to have more control over the bag. And I don't want too much icing coming out. Once I do the outline, then I can put a little bit more pressure, go a little bit more, quicker, and be a little bit more careless, because it's going to be contained by that first original border that we've done. So the reason why I did a sort of line is because we're going to have a sort of night sky with a snowy hill on the bottom. So what I want to do is grab my sprinkles while this icing is still wet, and I want to put them on again while it's still wet, so that when it dries, the sprinkles are stuck in there. You can put as many sprinkles as you want, as little sprinkles as you want. If you don't want them at all, or want a different color, yellow for stars or whatnot, it's totally completely up to you. This is just my take on it, and like I said, if you want different ones, it's totally up to you. And if they don't fall in the right place, please use your scribe to move them around. Don't feel like, you watch these videos, a lot of them are edited out because we only have so much time on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, whatever it might be, that we edit those little parts out. But we use our scribes a lot to fix the little things, like if a sprinkle is too close to the edge, if they fall together, if they didn't fall in the icing, deep enough to get stuck in there. So don't feel like you can't use your scribe to fix those mistakes, or I guess little messes that we make. So while the blue is still wet, I'm going to go in with my white flood icing. And the reason I'm going to go while it's still wet is because the icing will go together with the blue, and it'll sort of create a clean, flat background look. If I waited for the blue to dry, we would see a crease between the two colors, but that's not what I want. So I want a clean, nice background, so I'm going to do it right away before it dries. So you can see now it's dry. So I'm going to outline a Christmas tree here. And again, this is, my take on what I want to put. You can do whatever you'd like, or put the tree as big, small, wherever you want it. So what I'm going to do is outline it first, and then we'll move on to another step while the outline dries. The reason I like to dry my outlines is because I feel like they hold up better when I flood. Sometimes if I don't dry them and I flood, I feel like the outline gets stuck to the flood, or I can push it too easily with my piping bag and it loses the shape. Especially for small details like this with sharp corners, I do like to outline things like that. And here I have my outline consistency white for the bottom of the snowman. I'm just doing a rough circle, and I'm going to fill it in with my outline consistency. I don't want it to crater. So I'm filling it in with a thicker consistency. It's not a very big area, so I can easily just shake my bag a little bit in there and fill it up as much as I can with icing. And I'm sort of pushing out the circle just to make it nice and round. I'm just wiggling my bag in there just to smooth out the icing as I pipe it. Okay, so I'm going to do my red flood icing on the bottom here. And remember how we didn't wait for the blue to dry before we pipe the white? Now that the blue and white is dry, I can go ahead and pipe my red, and now I will have a crease between my red icing and my white icing. So that's the difference when you pipe something next to something that's wet or dry. It either gives you a smooth look if they're both wet, or if one's dry and one's wet, that's where you get those lines and those creases and a separation. I like to do as many steps as possible in one sitting before I have to dry my cookie again. So that's why I did the outline of the tree, I did the snowman bottom, then I did the red flood on the bottom, and now I'm going to go back to my snowman because I've let the snowman crust over. It's a thicker icing, so it doesn't take as long to dry. And I'm going to do the same thing, just a rough circle, and then I'm going to fill it in. This is my outline consistency. It's a small area. I can fill it in really easily and smooth it out quickly because it's such a small area, and if I put enough icing in there, if I make it, bubbly enough, the icing, it's easy to smooth out. If it's a thin layer, it's not as easy. So now that I let it dry for a few minutes and crust over, I can go ahead carefully pipe the nose carrot detail. So this is a stiffer icing. It's like an outline icing, and reason being is it's a very tiny detail. And if I go in with a flood, chances are that it will just puddle into a circle. So I want something that's stiffer to hold the shape. I go in there with my scribe after, just make sure that it's pointy or make sure it's the shape that I want because it is a tiny detail. So you can use your scribe to make it pointy or more triangular or however you'd like it. If you can't get the details with your bag, always use your scribe to go in there and fix it up how you'd like. I'm just going to go in and add a scarf as well for a snowman. I'm using the red outline consistency. And reason again for the outline is because if it's a flood, then it might be too thin and it might run off the side of the cookie. The snowman is sort of raised, and so if you put it, a flood, it might flow off the side of him, and that's not exactly what we want. And once I finish this detail, I'll go in and flood my Christmas tree. So here I've cut a really small hole, not super tiny. I mean, if your flood is not coming out of your bag, then you do need to cut a little bit bigger. Just do slightly bigger at a time if you do need a bigger hole to let your icing flow smoother. But I do want to keep it small because it's a small area. Those points are really tiny and I can't even get my icing bag in there. So I'll just go in with my scribe and pull the icing all the way to the edges of the tip of the trees. And while my tree is still wet, I'm going to use my flood icing, my red, and with the tiniest pressure on my bag, just enough for it to bubble out of the tip of my bag, and I will touch the icing down to the green icing, and you'll get that wet on wet look. So the red icing will just flatten right into the green icing, just to add a little bit more detail there. Now I've set it aside. And now my tree has dried enough for me to do a trunk. And again, I want that separation. I don't want the brown to run into the green icing, so I let it dry. And just with my outline, thicker consistency, again, these are small details. You want to keep them sharp looking details. That's where I use my outline or my stiffer consistencies, and we'll just put a little tree trunk. With my same icing, I'm going to go ahead and give some arms to our snowman. And again, you can make these, you can make your snowman or tree however you'd like. These are just general ideas. And once we're done that, things like the nose or the eyes and the mouth, these are tiny, tiny details. You can see the tip of my bag. I'm just putting enough pressure to get a little blob of icing and touching it down to my cookie so it sticks to my cookie and comes off my bag, basically. If you're not comfortable with doing small details like this is where your edible marker comes into play. So if you don't want to do the small details, you can always do this with an edible marker. You can get a black marker and just touch dots down or draw a smiley face. You know, I've done snowmen and the orange is such a tiny amount of icing that I just used an edible marker to draw on the nose. And I just want to add a little bit of texture to the snow on the bottom here. So what I'm going to do is add a little bit of my icing. You can use your flood or your outline if it's not too thick. Either one works fine. And just with a brush, I'm going to go in and sort of dab the brush, and just be careful not to get onto the red part or onto my sky. Not too much onto my sky anyways. And I put a little bit of squiggly line of icing and then just go in and spread it along and dab it. This just gives a little bit of texture so it doesn't look so smooth and it looks like a fresh snowfall on the ground. Again, this is a detail. If you want to add it, you totally can. If you don't like it, you can leave it out. And if you want to add more or less, you can really go for it. Just make sure that your bottom is dry enough before you start doing this. Otherwise, you will break through your icing. And that is basically our basic snowman snow globe. So if you want to kick it up a little notch here, what you can do is add some sprinkles to your bag and heat seal a bag closed. And once you add some sprinkles in there and you shake it up, it becomes a real snow globe. I think it's a really fun idea. You can really let your imagination run wild. And I would love for you to tell me in the comments if you've made them or send me pictures. You can always DM me on Instagram. And I love to share your guys' cookies. Thank you so much for watching. And I hope you guys have a very Merry Christmas and happy baking.